All right. Welcome, Mathieu Nedelec, to the Exploring Health and Medicine podcast.
Hi, David.
So you're an exercise recovery scientist, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I was thinking we could start off the conversation with you just briefly going over why it's so important to recover from exercise.
Okay, so effectively, recovery is very important after training. This is a time when you adapt, you induce a training adaptation. So a lot of people are focused on training, the training sessions, the training boot, but this is really when you recover that you will induce adaptations, and that you will be you will yes you finally gain some performance. So
Right. So I understand that if you don't get enough recovery, you won't really gain performance in your exercise over time, right?
yes, this is always a balance to consider between the stress you will induce by training and the recovery. And yes, weeks after weeks, season after season, this is always a balance to consider in order to develop yourself on a long-term basis, on a long-term plan.
Yes. And we'll go into some methods on how to improve recovery later in the conversation, but I want to start going into how can one measure one's recovery from exercise? And specifically, let's start with heart rate variability. What is it and why can it be useful, and how is it useful?
Maybe it's better to take a broader approach firstly.
Yeah. Sure.
And during my my PhD, I proposed a review article on post-match fatigue and time course of recovery, especially among soccer players. But of course, whatever the discipline, each athlete is concerned. And in this review, we assessed the relevance of several recovery markers, such as physical performance markers, cognitive function, subjective markers, biochemical markers. So finally, and maybe before going deeper into the several parameters we can measure, I think it is important to state the variety and the multiple recovery markers we can use, both objective and subjective.
Yeah, I appreciate that you brought that up, because while heart rate variability is a measure that might be useful in some instances, and in my understanding is useful in some instances, as you say, there are many others. So I appreciate that point.
Yes, and if you want to speak about heart rate variability, it reflects the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic aspects of the autonomic nervous systems. And this is one metric that we used in our research studies. For example, we assessed heart rate variability during the very first minutes of slow wave sleeps by the means of electrocardiography. And we did that because slow wave sleep has been shown to be better for discriminating sympathovagal balance states than waking period. It is much more stable than waking periods. And what you have to know about heart rate variability is the fact that it is especially important to standardize as much as possible the condition of assessment. And to be honest, the interpretation is not so easy. So yes, I'm wondering if it is really convenient for non-athletes or, let's say, exercise lovers, because it is very time consuming and it may be very difficult to also interpret the results.
I see. Do you think that applies to, there are rings and there are wristbands and there are other products available commercially on the market? Do you think that those are not valid and reliable enough, or maybe they are just too difficult to interpret? What's your thoughts on those?
So you are right, David. There is a hype around new technologies. A lot of consumer devices on the market. I read that there is currently more than 100,000 health apps on the market, with a lot of them dedicated to sleep assessments. But when you have a look to the science, only 5% of them would have been validated. So this is, I would say, the problem, and it is important to repeat in this podcast that it is not possible to access the sleep architecture, so the different sleep stages, by the means of this device. They only record activity. So to be honest, they are doing pretty good the job in comparison to actimetry, which is a tool and a device we frequently used in our research. But it's yes, there is a lack of validation studies and a lack of proof about the interest of this device to assess the sleep architecture, which is only possible by the means of polysomnography. And in addition, it is also important to mention the fact that it may induce a risk of orthosomnia, which is a pathology, finally. Orthosomnia, yes, this is a term to describe people who are excessively obsessed by the sleep quantity and the sleep quality they achieved each night. So it may be also a problem induced by such devices, because if each morning this is your priority to get the report of your night, or even for some people during the night, you have to consult your smartphone to try to ascertain or to establish the quality of your sleep, it may be a potential risk and problem, of course.
Yeah, I can see how that could be harmful, to obsess about your sleep data to make sure that you are getting good sleep, while that, I can see why that would result in worse sleep, in fact. How do you measure sleep when you consult sports teams and athletes? Like, how do you, like, are you just asking them what's your subjective sleep, or do you use polysomnography, or what methods do you use in that work of yours?
So yes, you are right. Many methods exist to assess sleep quantity and sleep quality. So the gold standard is polysomnography. That is what is practiced in the hospital. So this is the reference, with electrodes on the head, and this is the gold standard, and the only method to access sleep architecture, so the alternation of different sleep stages through the night. With athletes, and it is much more convenient. We frequently use also actimetry to describe the sleep-wake patterns of athletes. So based on algorithms, which is validated, for each minute spent in the bed, the device will ascertain if the sleeper is sleeping or not. So this is a binary decision, waking or asleep. And this is also based on a threshold, an activity threshold. And finally, you also have different and several questionnaires that have been validated in the literature. So, and also mainly to record, I would say, subjective ratings about sleep and about the quality of sleep. So when I work with an athlete to improve his or her sleep, the first step is to establish a complete profile of the athletes, with a combination again of several methods, both objective and subjective methods.
I see. You mentioned actimetry. What does that mean? Like concretely, what form is it? Is it like a wristband, or is it like, where do you put it on the body?
Yes, you are the actimetry on the wrist. So it is such a watch. This is as a watch, and it will record activity during the night by 1 minute epoch, and depending on the total level of activity each minute, the software will establish if the sleeper is sleeping or not. So depending on a threshold, it will ascertain for every minute if this is sleep or wake. And
I see.
it is also interesting, and you will deduce several variables from the assessment, such as of course bedtime and wake up time, but also sleep onset latency, the time required to fall asleep, wake after sleep onset, time in bed and total sleep time, sleep efficiency, which is a ratio between total sleep time and time in bed, and also a sleep fragmentation index, which reflects the alternation between waking episodes and sleeping episodes. So several variables with several thresholds that have been proposed and recommended in the literature.
Yes, I see. Which are if you had to choose 3 only of those metrics that you mentioned, which are the 3 most important metrics as regards metrics for exercise recovery that will, if they are improved, result in improved exercise performance?
Are you speaking about the sleep assessment methods or the sleep variables?
Yes, I'm speaking about the variables that you mentioned that you can get out of the actimetry measurements.
Okay, so broadly, I would say that it is important to consider several dimensions around about sleep. Of course, the quantity of sleep. So what is your effective total sleep time. This is an important metric, but also the sleep quality. So for some authors, sleep efficiency, again, the ratio between total sleep time and time in bed may reflect a dimension of quality, but if possible, of course, the gold standard of polysomnography will offer many advantages to appreciate really the sleep quality. And another important dimension also is sleep regularity, and especially the regularity between weekdays and off days, weekend days. And this is an important metric. So I would say a metric about sleep quantity, another about sleep quality, and finally, the last one about sleep regularity. For example, the sleep regularity index. It is important to consider and to encompass the different dimensions of sleep. And yes, a good or a bad night is not just related to the quantity of sleep you obtain.
I see. Very interesting. So what I hear you say is that it's important to consider several dimensions of sleep quantity and quality, and also regularity. And I guess it depends quite a bit on the specific person and their situation, what metrics are most relevant and can be most useful in improving sleep. You mentioned the sleep regularity between weekdays and weekends as an important metric. Is that because athletes sometimes stay up late during the weekend and that impairs their overall sleep regularity, or why is that an important metric?
Yes, the discrepancy between your sleep-wake rhythms during the week and during the weekends is often reported both in the general population and also sometimes in athletes when there is, for example, a day off. Some authors, they also used the expression social jet lag to qualify this this phenomenon, and it is frequently observed among adolescents and adolescent athletes too.
I see. Okay, I'm thinking we're gonna go over a bit into, well, from how to measure sleep to how to improve sleep and recovery from exercise in general. But before we do that, do you have anything that you'd like to add to our discussion about measuring recovery from exercise to complete the picture?
I think so, and maybe we will have the opportunity to come back later.
Sure. So regarding how to improve recovery from exercise, does it matter what type of exercise we're talking about here? Does it matter if it's more intense or low intensity? Does it matter if it's more cardiovascular conditioning type of training, or if it's strength training, for example? Do these things matter in considering how one should optimally recover to get that adaptation effect?
Yes, I think that the first question to ask is, what is maybe the first cause, the first source of fatigue after the exercise? For example, it may be muscle damage, after a gym session. It may be a glycogen depletion after a long aerobic exercise, for example. In some cases, it may be also more cognitive or mental fatigue. For example, when you have to take several decisions during the session or the competition. And I will say that in this respect, recovery strategies that we will propose to athletes finally should target the main cause of fatigue in priority.
Interesting. So once again, I guess that means that the recovery improvement methods also depend very much on the individual and which sources of fatigue are active in that individual. That, like, the best methods depend on which are the sources of fatigue.
I will not be so categoric.
Okay.
So I like to consider the pyramid of recovery. This is a manner to propose a hierarchy of recovery strategies based on the level of evidence in the literature. So the foundations of the pyramid is sleep. So as we said just before, the sleep quantity, the sleep quality, the sleep regularity, but also every aspect of mental relaxation, the opportunity to quit also from your activity, from sometimes your obsession about your activity. So this is the foundation of the pyramid. After that, you will have nutrition and nutritional strategies. So these are the two most effective strategies, and to be honest, they will concern each athlete, whatever the discipline. And after that, if you progress, and the level of evidence for these two strategies is very high, and after that you will find water immersion, and especially cold water immersion, with also several proofs in the literature. And after that, to be honest, the level of evidence is much lower for a set of strategies such as compression garments, cryotherapy, sauna, massage, stretching. The level of evidence is much lower compared to the 2 or 3 main strategies that I presented just before.
Yes, I see. But so I'm thinking then that we'll go more in depth on those 3 that you mentioned that actually have evidence that they work. But just to be clear, those that don't have evidence, I guess that some of them, we just don't have enough evidence to say whether they are effective, and some of them there is evidence to say that they're not effective, correct?
Yes, you are right, and it is important to mention also because I'm also involved on the pitch, and so in science we try to standardize and to control as many variables as possible. So, and this is in this context that sleep and nutritional strategies and even cold baths showed and proved the effectiveness when controlling as many variables as possible. And to be honest, on the field, several variables will interact, and athletes they will usually mix several strategies into a recovery protocol. So it is also important to consider potential interactions between between strategies, and this is something that we tried to assess or to study. For example, we recently proposed a study about the interest of cold water immersion on sleep, for example. If I propose another example, so as I said, for massage, the level of evidence is pretty low, but if it induces a state of relaxation that may promote sleep during the subsequent night, I would say there is a positive synergy. So it is also important to consider, as you said, the individual preferences. And if for an athlete, for a player, it is important to use such a strategy because he believes that it is effective for him. Yes, you have to consider that also in your decision and in your sports science support.
Right. So you can sometimes maybe get or take advantage of there being a placebo effect.
For sure.
Yeah, interesting. As regards nutrition, what are the 3 most evidence-based strategies for promoting exercise recovery? Like in general, are there any principles that you would like to share that are the most important ones?
So again, it will depend on the exercise and the main source of fatigue. So you will not accompany in the same manner a weightlifter or an endurance cyclist or runner, for example. So, but let's say yes, you will find several types of protocol around protein, around carbohydrates, about supplements. And again, I'm the most interested in the synergy and, for example, the interest of nutritional strategies to promote sleep, for example. And yes, I'm pretty convinced that to establish this kind of synergy is very important. Ultimately to promote sleep.
Mm-hmm. So what are some nutritional strategies to improve sleep?
So the first thing to say is that nutrition is a potent time giver of the biological clock. So depending on the time, you will have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and depending on your regularity, it may synchronize the biological clock. So it may be considered in this way as an interesting time giver. And of course, depending on the composition of your breakfast, of your lunch, and finally of your dinner, you may hinder or promote sleep. So, for example, some foodstuffs such as bananas, turkey, pumpkin seeds have been shown to induce melatonin, which is a sleep hormone. You will also find a high level of melatonin in tart cherry juice. It may be also, in some circumstances, relevant to consume high glycemic foods during the dinner to favor sleep onset latency. So yes, by several mechanisms, you may promote the quality of your sleep based on the content of your plate.
Yes, interesting. Why is it that the high glycemic foods used or eaten during dinner time can reduce sleep onset latency?
So the mechanism in prisons is a bit complex, but after consuming high glycemic index meal, so you will induce an increase in insulin, and finally you will favor an important entry of several amino acids in muscle fibers. And the fact is that there is a competition between a tryptophan, which is an essential amino acid, and other amino acids to enter the brain. And if there is a massive entry of amino acid in muscle fibers, the availability of tryptophan to cross the blood-brain barrier is higher, and it may potentially favor the secretion of melatonin. So this is the reason why high glycemic index may be encouraged to favor sleep initiation.
Okay, so through increasing the insulin response, you mentioned that the amino acid metabolism in muscle is altered. How is it altered in muscle as a response to the insulin increase?
Yes, in response to the insulin increase, the majority of amino acids, they will entry the muscle fibers. So finally, when you will consider the ratio between amino acids and tryptophan, which are in competition to enter the blood-brain barrier, the quantity of tryptophan entering the brain is higher, and in the brain this is a place where tryptophan will be converted into serotonin and finally into melatonin. So this is a mechanism that is advanced to explain the higher synthesis of melatonin after high glycemic index meal.
Interesting. In my understanding, melatonin, it's pretty evidence-based to state that it reduces the sleep onset latency. Does it, and correct me if you think I'm wrong there, but otherwise, does it also improve any other aspects of sleep quality?
I think that it is important to consider again melatonin as a time giver. Melatonin is useful to synchronize the biological clock and not necessarily to induce sleep. What is true is I think that it is much more convenient and I would say safe to account on your food to increase the melatonin content in your brain in a natural manner rather than rather than relying on food complements that you will find in the drugstore, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it has been shown that doses of tryptophan as low as 1 gram can improve sleep. So it may be obtained by the consumption of foodstuffs naturally rich in tryptophan. So again, bananas, turkey, pumpkin seeds, chocolate, dry fruits. And yes, some studies have showed that tryptophan may improve both sleep latency and also the subjective sleep quality. So yes, it is from a point of view an interesting sleep hygiene strategies that you may use to improve your quality of sleep.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that there were studies showing that increased intake of tryptophan also improved the subjective sleep quality, but that's interesting. I spoke last week with two researchers in the field of the gut microbiome. I didn't ask them about connections with sleep, but I wanted to ask you if you know of any.
I read a recent systematic review on the subject, and to be honest, the research is in its infancy, but yes, some studies focused on the interconnection between intestinal microbiome and sleep disorder, and they have shown the growing importance of a healthy and balanced intestinal microbiome for the health and the host health. So it may be, I would say, a reciprocal influence in presence. So yes, the quality of your sleep may positively influence your microbiome, and by a reciprocal way, the health of your microbiome may also influence your sleep. But yes, to be honest, I have not a lot of elements to propose here, and I guess that this is yes, this is future studies need to be conducted on this subject, but I'm very fond of this kind of research because you consider sleep and health from a holistic perspective. And yes, I'm pretty convinced that I'm pretty convinced that the interesting and the most interesting results come from holistic approaches such as
Studying the effects of sleep and reciprocal effects between sleep and gut microbiome and other synergistic several factor studies, so to speak.
Yes, and even considering a multidisciplinary approach, and this is something that we try to adopt in our research projects. For example, we conducted a study about the influence of personality traits on sleep. So in collaboration with a sport psychologist, we also considered the influence of sociology and the pressure of time, for example, of elite athletes.
Yeah,
who often have to combine performance project and an academic project, so there is a lot of pressure on them. So we try to consider also this dimension in the
to get the whole picture.
Yeah,
I see. Can you briefly describe the results of that investigation into the role of personality traits in sleep?
So the first study we conducted on the subject was to consider the importance and the impact of personality traits, and it seems that athletes with a high level of neuroticism exhibit a deteriorated sleep quality. And for this study, we used a very often used questionnaire in sleep medicine, the Ford Insomnia in Response to Stress test. But it was not very specific to athletes, and this is the reason why we, after that, proposed a new questionnaire, the Insomnia in Response to Sports-Related Stress Test questionnaire, in which we considered 6 specific situations in which potentially the sleep may be impaired in comparison to normal sleep or baseline sleep. And the 6 situations were before competition, after daytime competition, after nighttime competition, after nighttime training, during training camp, and after injury. And we considered these 6 specific situation as potential sport-specific factors that may disturb sleep.
I see. And what were the results of that study?
So we validated the questionnaire.
Right. So it was a validation study for the questionnaire.
Yes, for the questionnaire. Right. And yes, it may be used, especially with athletes, also to open the discussion, yes, to consider if sleep is especially impaired during specific situations. So for some of them, it will be before the competition. So maybe it is important to develop effective strategies in anticipation, to develop a routine in anticipation of major events. And yes, for some of them, they will be very sensitive to nighttime competitions, and it will be very difficult for them to fall asleep just after. So yes, it may be again an opportunity to open the discussion and to focus the work on specific points and specific situations.
Yes. Did you mention that neuroticism impairs sleep in some way?
Yes, we considered 2 dimensions, neuroticism and conscientiousness.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the responses, we identified 3 profile after a cluster analysis approach. And yes, I would say the maladaptive profile with high levels of neuroticism, he presented deteriorated and a lower sleep quality compared to the adaptive profile with a low level of neuroticism and high level of conscientiousness. So yes, it was maybe a first step towards the education of sleep for athletes. And as we said before, it is very important to establish the profile of athletes, and personality is an important component of the profile before proposing a sleep program and sleep education program to improve the situation.
Yes, yes. As regards cold water immersion, if you had to summarize the findings in regards to cold water immersion as a method for improving post-exercise recovery, what would be your recommendation for the average Joe, but someone who likes exercise and wants to improve their recovery from exercise? What would be your suggestion for them as regards how they can start in an evidence-based manner using cold water immersion to enhance their recovery?
Yes, so I would say the main positive consequences of cold water immersion on recovery is anti-inflammatory effect induced by the immersion. There is also an analgesic effect that is induced by the cold. So yes, several studies have showed the effectiveness of cold water immersion after several exercise. But again, and it was the objective of one study we conducted a few years ago. Our objective was to establish a potential synergy between sleep and cold water immersion, because there is a close relationship between central body temperature and sleep initiation. So yes, in addition to be a recovery strategy, cold water immersion may also be viewed as a manner to cool down the body.
I see. And how long and to what extent, like, is it enough with cold water immersion to the hip level, or should you do your entire body to get optimal recovery effects? And for what duration should you do cold water immersion to get optimal recovery from? Well, I guess it might depend on the type of exercise and so on, but do you have any general tips?
So the most often used protocol is 10 minutes at 10 degrees. So this is the most often used protocol up to the iliac crest. As you mentioned, in discipline involving also collision on the upper body, it may be more effective to also consider an immersion of the upper body, so up to the neck. And in the study we proposed, we were interested into cooling down and emerging also the head, because the head, in spite of the small surface area, exerts a profound effect and an important effect on thermoregulation. So this is the reason why we propose three conditions: whole body immersion, so with the head immersed, partial cold water immersion up to the iliac crest, and a control condition without any immersion. And yes, we assessed the interest of the two strategies on sleep among endurance runner after a trail simulation. It was the aim of the study.
Right. I know your time is up for today's conversation. You have written a book in French, right? Do you want to mention a bit about that book?
Yes, I wrote a book. You are right about sleeping. So the aim of this book was to bring knowledge to the general population, I would say. So it is scientific with several references, but the main objective was to make it accessible to a lot of people. And the specificity of the book, I would say the originality is to propose several testimonials from elite athletes about the relevance of sleep, the interest of sleep for their physical performance, the cognitive performance, their well-being, both during their career and after for those who are retired. So yes, I guess this is also a manner to support and to encourage people to take care about their sleep. In our modern society, sleep is sometimes neglected. So I would say it's very important to regularly repeat the importance of sleep for everyday life.
Yes, I agree about that. I will make sure to include a link to somewhere where people can buy that book and read it if they know French. Thank you very much, Mathieu, for coming on the Exploring Health and Medicine podcast.
Thank you, David, for the invitation, and speak with you soon.